So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Ian Richardson, CEO and co-founder of theICEway and Seatrade Global's Technology Ambassador. Now, I'm very excited about the technology content we've got lined up today. We're going to be discussing things like the Internet of Things, cybersecurity, IT operations, and the convergence of digital and physical experiences a bit later on. So we've got a real mix-up of content for you. But as we all know, the last few months or couple of years has been a pretty rough time for everybody in the industry. But technology itself hasn't stopped, and it's technology that's really the key to getting our industry restarted. And one of these technologies is the Internet of Things. So basically, the Internet of Things, or an IoT, and this is something I quickly Googled. It refers to a system of interrelated, internet-connected objects that are able to connect and transfer data over a wireless network without human intervention. But basically, it's anything connected to the internet. In a cruise context, that can be like anything from a medical device to a robot bartender. And it can also include all the multiple interface devices on the ships that the crew and the guests use, like mobiles and touch screens and things like that. So to discuss this topic today, we've got a couple of really good speakers and panelists, very experienced, who are going to join us physically. And we've got one that's going to join us virtually as well. So first up is Jay Schneider, who is the Chief Product Innovation Officer at Royal Caribbean Group. Welcome, Jay. And next up is Greg Ross-Munro, the CEO of Sourcetoad, who developed guest-facing specialist cruise software for much of the industry. And actually, you can see Greg's team have put together this information booklet that you've got in front of you. Hi, Jay. And joining us virtually, we have Luca Pronzati, if you're with us. Oh, there you are, I can see you. Hi, Luca. So Luca is the Chief... Hi, Luca. Luca's the Chief Business Innovation Officer at MSC Cruises. So welcome, guys.
Thank you, Ian.
I'm going to sit down for this, otherwise I'm going to be towering over you two. So I want to start off with you first, Jay. So can you tell us in your own words why you think an increased prevalence of IoT is a good thing for the guest experience at Royal Brands, and what your strategy is for IoT?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Your definition was great. Everything on a ship, in a terminal, in people's lives can be internet connected. Much of my home is now internet connected, which is both fun and creepy. From a guest perspective, one of the things that we keep looking at and talking about is how do we continue to let you vacation effortlessly while we connect the world around you, but be real conscious of that creepy factor. The fact that throughout my house, Alexa can listen to me wherever I go, and every plug is interconnected, and every light is interconnected, and the amount of data that Amazon and others are collecting about me in my home, we're really thoughtful of what that means for the guest experience. And there are unlocks. Unlocks both to make it easier for you to be on vacation, unlocks to make it easier for you to wait to get in line if you have to get in line, to not to put you in line at all. And then fun unlocks, we have, if you've seen our Celebrity Apex ship, the Magic Carpet has an IoT device in it so that somebody can find out where the magic carpet is at any time of the day. Right. And some of those are just surprise and delights, and some of those are very practical.
Mm-hmm. Great. Now, Luca, if you can hear us, what sort of applications have you been using IoT for?
Okay, so basically, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and good afternoon to everybody, or good morning. MSC has already, started deploying IoT infrastructure back in 2017 with the launch of the first what we call smart ship, MSC Meraviglia, into the market. And since that time on, so basically we have deployed the application like, for example, family and friends locator or dynamic wayfinding on the ship. So basically, again, going back to the point of Jay, so IoT is really supporting and elevating the customer experience on board. So providing additional set of functionalities whereby our guests, while being on board, can appreciate all the services, can enjoy the ship, can discover any place with the total relax. So in this sense, for us, the technology is really meant to be applied to be at the service of the hospitality on board. That could be in any kind, in any field of application for any services, but that's our basically groundbreaking concept that guided us in the adoption since the beginning.
Okay, thanks, Luca. So I want to bring in Greg now, so just to offer a different perspective. So as a technology vendor delivering solutions to the industry, how are you implementing IoT into your solutions?
Hi, Luca, as well, by the way. Yeah, thanks. Good question. Everything we do now is IoT. I mean, it's just the internet word on that is a little misleading sometimes because everything we do has to work on board. When the satellite's down, it still has to continue to work. And basically that just means reporting. It just means there's some data analytics coming in. There's a dashboard that somebody can see. And they're using it to mainly be proactive. So, a screen is down, or a refrigerator's temperature is fluctuated between two variables that is unacceptable. And so, I mean, when we started out, we had an initial product that was mainly for data synchronization between content management and shipboard systems. Mm-hmm. Now that system has grown into basically being an IoT monitoring system, which we never thought it was going to be because there were so many disparate systems on the ship that we needed to just deliver content to, that we inadvertently became an IoT company. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, almost everything we do now has some IoT component in it, whether you're plugging a Raspberry Pi into a refrigerator or you're monitoring the health of a set-top box in a cabin.
Right. And I know at Sourcetoad you put a lot of effort into real sort of customer testing. We've talked about that before. How do you keep the sort of IoT, when we're thinking about guest experience, how do you keep the IoT experience as unobtrusive as possible, for certain purists that don't want to see any tech?
I mean, I think it depends on your demographic. You know, if you have a Grandioso or something like that, or maybe sometimes you want some of that technology to be visible. It's kind of cool when you go and you see something and it interacts with you and you don't mind that creepy factor. Maybe you're a slightly younger, more tech-savvy, hip crowd. If you've got like a Wonder of the Seas or something like that, that's cool. And then sometimes you have more conservative, traditional passengers who you kind of have to keep some of that stuff out of sight. We've done crazy things like we've built beacons into picture frames on pieces of art or on like the labels of something. So on a previous generation ship, it was just a label, and then the next generation, the label actually is an IoT device. It's just hidden away. And does the passenger have to pick up their phone and interact with something versus is it a passive response? For example, you walk past something, it detects you, and then some sort of data is sent up the chain. So these things are really easy to hide now. They're tiny. If you want to embed technology in anything, it's pretty durable. Occasionally you put an infrared body heat sensor into a smoke detector and people still complain. They're like, what is that green? What is that red thing over there? It's like, so there's a balance, but it's definitely about how you message it to your passengers and also how obtrusive it is.
Yeah. Did you want to come in on that? Or you're okay? Yeah, Luca, I was just going to ask you, in terms of if we think about the size of ships, is IoT really only for use for larger, higher capacity ships where you've got a lower ratio of crew to guests? I'm thinking more of the sort of Meravia class versus the newer luxury Explorer class that you have. Is there just as much IoT on both?
Well, Ian, this is definitely a good question. In our view, I think, IoT could be applicable for both. The point is here not really the fact that, you showcase that you have technology in the front end of the guest, but really what does it mean for you? What is your objective? What do you want to achieve with technology? Clearly, between the two brands, there is a completely different purpose. So while on the contemporary segments, we do want to offer more front-end guest experience powered and enabled by technology like IoT. In the Explorer journey, this will be something more, from a certain perspective, sophisticated but less intrusive. So it's a really completely different perspective, a different approach, but from a guest, from a passenger side, rather than from an infrastructure perspective.
Okay. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about data. And I see this in two parts. So firstly, in terms of amalgamating all the data that we get from these IoT devices, what challenges do you have to overcome? And secondly, in terms of the data that you do gather, what kind of insights and feedback are you getting to improve the customer experience? So I don't know, who wants to take the first one, which is how do you deal with all the data from all these devices and what kind of challenges there are?
Yeah, I can take that. We've had, as part of our restart of global operations, whether it's adding wearables for contact tracing, cameras for contact tracing that are passively watching and detecting other devices that are on the ship, both for the guest as well as back of house. The simple reality is we need more and more processing power on our ships. And so in some cases we can't handle it and we have to pull data off, process in the cloud, and then put reports and data back in. But what we found is data is a real challenge. It's a real challenge for two reasons. One, just like I said, the amount of space, processing capacity, intelligence needed. But then you need people who know what to do. You really need the right people on board and shoreside who can understand how to connect the dots of all of this data that we're collecting. I love Luca's point. You've got to be able to know what you want out of it, whether it's small ship, big ship, whatever the use case is. And you need people who are really trying to understand how to maximize the data. Otherwise, it's just a ship loaded with devices collecting data that you're not doing anything with. And so for us, it's the physical processing and then the people that know what to do with the data.
Okay. And in terms of the data that you do gather, how are you using the insights you gain from it? Maybe that's to you, Luca.
Well, in general, with the data we gather, we try always, first of all, I just want to make clear the concept that any data that is gathered on board for any purposes is done since the beginning by default and by design to be GDPR compliant, security compliant, and so on, because this is a very delicate topic. Having said that, then whatever we do normally, we try to process this data with the objective to, again, go back to our guest, to offer something that is more customized and personalized to his or her expectation. So this is our all data that enable us, which was not the case in the past, to really elevate and transform continuously the experience, because we don't need to forget that, first of all, our guests are people living the day-by-day life, and their expectation and their consumer habits are changing quite fast. So we need to keep the pace on that, and whatever we do on board is just a kind of a replication of what we do what happens in our day-by-day life, with the difference that this is the experience during the vacation. So we need to add something on top.
Yeah. Have you got anything on how the data can be used, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I come from like the vendor and just the pure software side. So gathering it, collecting it, storing it, even processing it is getting easier to some minor degree. Maybe not the amounts of data that you collect, but some of the ML stuff, the machine learning stuff that we had 3 or 4 years ago, a lot of it was you had to be a data analyst, you had to be a data scientist, you had to know the right questions, and some of that stuff is slowly starting to change where the ML models are getting kind of interesting enough where they'll actually start finding patterns. Maybe they're on their own, which is also creepy, but rather than like specific targeted questions, which I always used to say was the only way to do this. But the only other like thing to add there is, for me, we find patterns, but they don't make any difference unless there's some sort of like operational effect. And I'm not saying we've given up in trying to affect change on board in terms of what crew or training or, like if you find out that, say, guests show up on average 15 minutes later for their reservations as the year goes on and gets darker earlier. I don't know why. Just let's say you find that. How do you change actual staffing behavior on board the ship? And that to me, like affecting that kind of change is really difficult from an operational perspective. And I think we might see that starting to change because people will start being brought these solutions and these opportunities more and more. But also it means that the way that you kind of use it to affect the passenger or the crew is maybe more informing them about something, sending a push notification or a recommendation rather than trying to change everything in the way the whole ship works.
Right. Okay. I was sort of trying to make this session a little bit interactive with some audience participation because I know we've got some people virtually. So I did send a question out for people just to post any questions in. And so far, the only thing I've got is, well done, Ian. How did you manage to travel here with all the restrictions? So thanks, Donna. But I think, something related to the content. But if anybody needs to know that, I did have to spend 2 weeks in Barbados, which was an absolute ordeal. So it's terrible. Okay, so anybody's got any questions, do post them in, and there's some guys with mics, so if you have got questions, I'll try and find some time for questions as well in the audience. So, Luca, you touched on it, security and GDPR. How does IoT make things more safe or less safe in terms of cybersecurity? And how do you minimize the risks?
Well, in general, theoretically, this is less safe because whenever you add additional device that can represent an entry point to your infrastructure and ecosystem, this theoretically represents a risk, a bigger risk. But in practical and into the application, this is something that you need to manage since the beginning. So when I was mentioning before, to design an infrastructure and deploy an infrastructure, keeping into consideration the by design and by definition concept of the GDPR and more specifically the security and cybersecurity, this give us the level of assurance that you need to have before you take any further action. It's a completely different change into the paradigm to do something afterwards related to this topic than doing it during the design process. This is what we do. We are obliged to do in this way. There is no other solution. So you need to take this concept since day one into the design and of the solution, so that whatever you will build up afterwards, this will be built with a strong concept and the strong control in place, and any kind of application that would help us to prevent, minimize, and ideally cancel any risk of attack.
Yeah, so security by design is key. Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience? Anybody want to? Not yet? No? Okay. All right, well, I've got one. So we talked about some of the challenges. Oh, you have got one. Christian.
Good morning, Christian Severly, CLIA Research. And one of the challenges that we have in research is to tell the story about the impact of passengers when they visit destinations. So when they leave the ship, and how much in terms of economic impact at the destination level, even like the interaction with the different businesses. Do you think that what you are proposing on board the vessel can be extended to when we have excursions or people visiting destinations, and could we collect data at the global level to tell a better story about our impact?
That's a good question. Well, this is good for your new role, actually, Jay.
Maybe.
Converging the physical with the digital.
Maybe. The reality is, and I loved your definition of IoT, I kind of separate your mobile device a bit from IoT, just because you interact with it so often. It kind of breaks the natural definition. But the reality is the straw market in NASA is not going to have an IoT labeled T-shirt in it, probably for a little bit of time at least. And so really understanding kind of behavior as people get away from our highly connected ecosystems on board our ship is difficult, but not impossible. And it probably transitions a bit again to away from IoT more to the device that they're carrying. And so whether that is a wearable, whether it is their cell phone, that's probably the way that we're going to best get the most intelligence on what they're doing. With the exception of, there's a handful of programs that I've seen lately that they're really exciting. A company met with me and they're starting to try to figure out how to activate networks of shore excursion providers with better technology in destinations that don't have it. And as those types of ideas and invention come to maturity, it just gives us new touch points of what our guests are doing, while they're traversing. Privacy and security, of course, has to be thought of up front, but I think that will kind of get us deeper and deeper into the destination. When we don't own it. When we own it, that's a different thing. When it's our private destinations and our owned properties, that's where there's for sure opportunity. Yeah,
you have a lot more control when it's your own destination.
Yeah,
because it's just
the cabana that I'm in or the water park that I go to. So.
Are you doing anything in resorts or on land, or is it just purely ship-based, Greg?
Yeah, we do some stuff in resorts and on land. How do I say this without stepping on anyone's toes? There's some interesting mesh technology that we've been playing with in non-connected environments or in low connectivity environments where everybody here, we wanted to chat with each other in this room and there's no actual network, that our devices can form their own mesh network. Technology is really useful for disaster recovery or for power outages, but it does have applications in cruise and shore excursion, especially if you are in a destination that doesn't have that kind of infrastructure. And then as soon as once you've built a mesh network out of your guests themselves, out of the passengers, then you've essentially extended that ability for you to continue tracking and monitoring. Payment solutions are another one that I've seen tinkered with. I haven't done anything personally, but the way that I saw that approached was on loyalty programs. So a loyalty program on board can actually be extended to partner networks shoreside. So, you came from this ship or this cruise line, and that showed my loyalty card, and that is just a way of tracking back and seeing what the impact was from a shoreside perspective, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Okay, great. So I want to sort of got a question about, I guess, mistakes or learning. So we talked about some of the challenges on data and security. Can you share with us any challenges that you've faced where you kind of got it wrong? Because it is all new technology and you've had to go back to the drawing board. Is there anything you can share?
Yeah, I can. We haven't made, I wouldn't highlight, I think we've done a good job, at least our corporation, and I largely knowing MSC and others have done a really good job of building privacy by design, security by design upfront in this type of technology. So I can't point to mistakes there. Challenges though, we've spent a lot of time studying just kind of radio signals, beacon signals, and the movement of those signals across ships. I've told people before that at some point we went from wooden ships to steel ships, and in that transition, nobody kind of future cast the fact that radio frequency and beacon frequency is going to bounce across a ship. So we spent a lot of time, I wouldn't say with mistakes, but challenges trying to fine-tune beacon technology, Wi-Fi technology to help enable everything we've talked about. And then I also work for a cruise brand that crazily split a ship up and opened up atriums in the middle of it. And so we also then had to solve for how could somebody who we can detect on deck 8 teleport to deck 15 with one footstep, because you've gone from figuring out how to make a beacon work down a really tight steel hallway to opening up the air around you. And those are real fun challenges, but they're challenges nonetheless.
And I think Luca, you've had similar sort of things. I remember we've had a conversation about this before when you were implementing beacons.
Yeah, the same. Yeah, totally agree with Jay. So, we spend a lot of time to fine-tune all the infrastructure. We had so many issues that were totally unknown up to the day when we start deploying and switch on the the infrastructure on the ship when we realized that this material was creating this kind of problem on the propagation of the radio signal. And there was the swimming pool, which has completely different scenarios, which was not foreseen at all. Then when we went into the, Meraviglia ship, they have this promenade with the 3 decks, 3 decks. So you have the jump of the signal from one deck to the other one. It was impossible at the beginning to fine tune because the location was totally wrong. It was still in the place, but on the wrong deck. So I agree. I mean, these are the kind of challenges we normally face because the majority of the partners and suppliers that are providing this kind of solution, normally they do land-based. And land-based is completely different scenarios. And whenever you try to bring them on board, then this is where the challenge starts. And you have to know the ship, you have to know the peculiarities of our business. You need to transfer the knowledge to the new suppliers to understand that the ship is a kind of shopping mall sitting on the ocean. It's made of steel. It has so many different decks. I mean, so complicated that, we discussed also with Jay months ago on the contact tracing. It's been a really huge challenge for all of us, I think, because it's a completely different environment.
I'm just looking at the time here. We've got about 3 minutes left. Is there any other questions from the audience? Anybody want to say anything? No? Okay. So I guess I'll just squeeze one more in. What would you say your key objectives are when choosing an IoT solution?
I don't think there's one solution. I mean, there are, again, I go back to something Luca said. You got to really understand what you're trying to solve for and then figure out what is the right technology and then figure out how to make that technology work. I'm going to correct something Luca said a little bit. Luca said land-based solutions are different. The reality is they're so much easier, which makes this industry so much more fun because every fun problem you want to go solve is just infinitely harder, which in and of itself is super fun. But everything is met with its own challenge. We were trying to make an AR piece work on a stage once using an actuator that as the ship swayed, moved it 5 feet the wrong way because it assumed that the person was moving and they weren't. And so those are just, everything requires kind of its own evaluation, assessment, and then its own problem solving based on the environment that we have, which is
it's fun.
It's fun.
Makes it
it's
fun.
absolutely fun.
Luca, what about you?
I agree. It's going back to what we said before. It's also, quite a challenge to choose not only the solution, I would say to choose the right people because, again, to be able to deploy and deliver something on a ship, you don't need only to have the best technology. You need to have the right people, the right technician, the right level of flexibility, which can follow you whenever you have an issue and can support you to solve it, which is something that, as Jay said, maybe it doesn't happen land-based to the same level of complexity and to the same level of frequency that we have on board. So it's really to choose people that you can trust on, that can come with you weekend time on the ship, because normally things go wrong during the week and not really during the office time. And these are the kind of solution you need to choose.
Yeah, it's vendors that can stay be always available all the time, basically, because things go wrong at all sorts of hours of the day. Yeah.
That's our business.
There's also for the one thing for me that I've learned is there's always two ways of looking at one of these problems. One is from a guest experience perspective, and one's from an operational perspective. And if you can prioritize solutions that solve both problems at the same time, then those are the easiest things to go for, the low-hanging fruit, just at least because they're easy to sell. It's great to have better and better guest experience, but if you can, closing your blinds using an IoT system, if is cool for the passenger, but if you can sell it as a fuel-saving, energy-saving system for the operation, then it's doubly impactful, and that's the thing that goes to the top of the list.
That's great. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much out of time. I've just got one surprise for some lucky person in the audience, actually. So we have got some golden tickets, which you win an iPad. So underneath your seats, if you have a look, there'll be an envelope. Peel off.
Just the audience, with nothing under.
you might get lucky if
I
there
think
is
we
an
say it was
envelope.
a trip to Barbados and a quarantine
Yeah,
hotel.
my return flight to Barbados. Don't peel off the stickers, because they're the fire stickers. Oh, look at that! Congratulations. So yeah, just open it, and then yeah, you've got an iPad. No, just keep hold of it, and then we'll give it to the production team at the end. So well done. And we are going to be giving out more later on in these sessions, the technology sessions. So you'll have to keep coming back. So, but yeah, just without further ado, then I just want to thank the panelists. Thank Luca for joining us, Jay, Greg. It's been great, and we'll see you again hopefully soon.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you, everybody.